Well, hello everyone. Hi, hey, welcome to a new video, this time on the EU sanctions against Russia. It's the 20th package of measures against Russia since the start of the Ukraine war of Russia against Ukraine. And that led us to 20, can you believe it, sanctions packages. Now, I have seen a lot in my years in customs and sanctions and export controls, but 20 sanction packages, that is something special. So in this video, we're going to look at what's in this video, what's in this package. We have because there's so much to cover, we have decided to create small videos, individual videos on certain topics, and then we're going to complement that with another video and another video so that you can have bite-sized videos rather than a full 50 minutes or so of video. So this is easier to digest. You can look at one thing and come back and watch the other video on the second part, the third part, and there's actually a fourth part as well. So step by step, we're going to get you through a really complicated topic that is sanctions, EU sanctions policy, and especially sanctions against Russia, and with a clear focus on the 20th sanctions package. Now, we have produced videos on all the previous sanction packages. So if you're interested in that, just subscribe to the YouTube channel and then you will be notified of further sanctions videos, but also you can scroll back in the archives and you can find all the different videos there. Okay, so if we're ready to go, let's go and let me share my screen, and then we're ready for part one of our series. So here we go. So welcome to part one of our four-part series on EU sanctions against Russia. This is the 20th sanctions package. This is part one, overview and energy. So let's take a look at what are the restrictive measures, as the EU calls it, regarding targeting revenue and military industrial complex. Now, if you don't know who we are empowering global trade compliance. We provide expert customs, trade compliance, and supply chain solutions that empower businesses to navigate complex international trade regulations with confidence. We simplify global trade, ensuring efficiency, and we cover this for clients in the EU, UK, and of course, United States. Customs manager here to help. So let's look at this. Oh, I can see the flag is not there, but that's okay. Let us understand what has happened here with this 20th package. It took us a while to get to this part. It took us a while to get to a restrictive package, the 20th restrictive package. It was delayed several times due to opposition by one member state, but finally, at the end of April, we got there. We have now introduced in this 20th package a multi-layered economic sanctions a package, if you wish, targeting key sectors. And of course, the EU commits its unwavering support for Ukraine and its people, and it then has a focus on civilian infrastructure and energy protection in the work that it does with the Ukraine, and that's why we needed to target specific sectors in the Russian economy. The scale of the measures, and this is the overview, starts with 120 further individual listings. So now we're talking thousands and thousands of people, organizations, and entity that are on the EU sanctions list. Now, we should clarify what that means. So people are individual persons. Of course, the difficulty is that you need to list them by Latin name, as we would work in the European Union in most member states, but also we would work in Cyrillic. So we need to have those listed in a regulation, in the EU sanctions regulations. And in total, we are now talking about thousands of different individuals, not only from Russia, but also from Belarus and other countries around the world that are supportive of this war in Ukraine, either directly or indirectly. So it's a massive expansion of listing of this registry of people. Again, when they say individual listings, they mean people, but they also can mean organizations. So that would be trade associations or any type of organizations, banks, etc. And of course, enterprises per se. So names of entities. And again, they don't have to be in Russia. They can be in the United Arab Emirates. They can be in India. They can be in Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, everywhere, Turkey, everywhere where there is support to this war, indirectly or indirectly. So that's the first part that is always very noticeable. It's the largest expansion of people in a list in 2 years. We have actually a dual strategic objectives with this 20th sanctions package. On one hand, we want to cripple, or the EU wishes to cripple the war machine, so systematically undermining the manufacturing and technological capabilities of the Russian military-industrial complex. So the ability to wage war needs to be limited, needs to be reduced in order for them not to continue waging the war against Ukraine. Sanctions are also there to strategically targeting the high revenue sectors of energy and oil to limit the budget for the ongoing aggression. So making it harder to get funds from the outside to fuel the war effort. And at the same time, use sanctions to strengthen measures that ensure Ukraine gets the financial and military support and a major boost that is needed to hold the ground effectively. So it's a dual, if you want, triple objective. So now that we know what the objectives are, let's look at what about the energy and curbing energy revenues. Strategic strikes against Russia's most vital financial lifeline. So the first thing that was introduced by the 20th sanctions package after the listings was a further ban on certain crude oil and petroleum imports. The introduction on the basis for a future maritime services ban. This is what the direction of travel where we're heading on Russian oil products. And that is developed in full cooperation with the G7 partners and the price cap coalition to maximize global efficiency. So as you know, we're not outright banning certain Russian oil products due to the sensitivities that brings, but we have a price cap coalition which lowers so the price cap for these products, and therefore eventually leads to a ban on crude oil and petroleum. So this is furthered in the 20th package, and therefore the direction of travel is a maritime service ban. And of course, we have seen this in previous packages, the dealings with the shadow fleet ecosystem. So we have vessels that are under dubious flags or flying under no real flag or disguising the flags, the so-called shadow fleets, as Russian vessels are no longer allowed to enter European ports. They will go at length to try to circumvent that by crossing the sea under a no flag or under a illegal flag or under a flag under which they're not listed. So the more we add vessels, names of vessels, the more difficult it will become for commercial vessels from Russia to operate and go into the world by sea. So 46 additional vessels with a port access ban and a broad services prohibition. And that really makes a difference. If you can't call a port anymore and you can't get any services, that means once you leave Russian waters, then there's quite a stretch before you can get support again. Because everywhere around, at least the western part, everywhere around Russia leads you into EU waters. And if you do get into business with certain Russians, so not all vessels are prohibited. There are 46 additional vessels that brings the list to multiple hundreds now. And if you're in a maritime trade, then you will need to know what are these vessels. And I can recommend the Danish website on this, where they usually are doing a great job in listing the names of the vessels. Otherwise, you'd have to look in legislation to figure out which vessels are listed. There is a mandatory due diligence checks required for the sale of tankers to prevent fleet expansion. So if you're in this specific area of selling tankers, there is a additional due diligence that needs to be carried out by anyone wishing to buy a tanker in the European Union to make sure that you're not buying a tanker that is under a sanctioned list. Maritime insurers targeting entities providing insurance to illegal trade vessels. So obviously the additional vessels should not be allowed to be insured and that is then crucial for maritime insurers as well. And then for non-EU tankers targeting ships circumventing the oil price cap mechanism. So this is any other way by using non-EU tankers outside Russia to circumvent this oil cap mechanism that you are so aware of. So all of this is a set of measures to target the shadow fleet that is circulating or that is on the European waters and that is under the radar, that's trying to get oil moved from A to B. The more this is limited, the more it is difficult for Russia's economy to properly function because of the dependence of having to move the Russian oil outside of Russia. And this continues with LGN and seaborne assets. So future-proofing the ban on the provision of maintenance and services of Russian liquefied natural gases, so LNG. These are tankers and icebreakers. And then from January 2027, it would be illegal to provide LNG terminal services to Russian entities or national controlled operators. So a further tightening of LNG and seaborne assets. And then, of course, we have port facilities that are very specific to Russia. And here again, we are issuing a broad range of sanctions. We are adding those to the sanctions pool. So we have Murmansk, we have Tuapse, we have Karium, and all of these are locations in Russia and this time also Indonesia. And these are now also subject to sanctions, which means we're no longer allowed to do business in these ports, with these terminal, and we're not able to facilitate any activities with these port terminals. Therefore, we see what the strategic location is. So Murmansk, for example, key Arctic gateway for oil and gas exports. Tuapse, major Black Sea oil terminal facility, so no more business with these. And that also means if they want to do business with European businesses, European tankers, European persons, then that is not allowed anymore. And any relationship with these ports and port facility needs to be severed. Now, to put it into a quote by Kaja Kallas, the High Representative of the European Union, Russia's war economy is under growing strain while Ukraine is getting a major boost. Do you remember that refers to the 90 million or billion, I forget the numbers now, of support that is now coming to Ukraine. So while the EU tightens the screws on Russia's sanctions, there is a major boost to defense and resilience for the Ukraine. We must keep this pressure up until Putin understands his war leads nowhere. That is what the EU wishes. This is the message that the EU wishes to convey, and this 20th sanction package is there to support that. So the question here that we're asking, and we're coming to the end of part one of our presentation on the 20th sanctions package, is this. Is your business compliant with the latest energy measures? If you're exposed to energy, or if you're working with energy, then you need to understand how these new measures affect the oil cap. It affects the LNG terminals, LNGs, the port terminals in general, and how the shadow fleet is being, how the controls on the shadow fleet are being tightened. So that would be the part one of our discussion as relates to energy and the overall measures that are in the 20th sanction package. So thanks again for watching. It's great to see you, and I see you in part two, which will explore more of the 20th sanction package. Thanks.